Imagine a world where professional cycling had 5 Grand Tours, or 10. Races stretching across continents, each demanding 3 grueling weeks of pain, strategy, and survival. But in the real world, we only have 3. The Tour de France, the Giro d'Italia, and the Vuelta a España. Why? Why did the world of cycling stop at just 3? Why didn't countries like Germany, the United States, or even Belgium, with its deep cycling routes, ever establish a Grand Tour of their own? Was it the cost, the politics, the calendar? Or was it something deeper? A battle over identity and the soul of a sport? Today on BikeFlix, we take you into the forgotten roads of cycling history to understand not just how the Grand Tours began, but why only these 3 survived. This isn't just history, it's a story of nationalism, war, media empires, and cultural power. At the turn of the 20th century, cycling was more than a sport. It was a spectacle, a tool of politics, and a weapon of journalism. In 1903, France gave birth to the Tour de France, but it wasn't the brainchild of cyclists. It was created by a newspaper, L'Auto. They needed to sell more papers, so they launched a race across the entire country, and it worked. It was brutal, 6 stages, thousands of kilometers, unpaved roads, but readers were hooked. The Tour became a national obsession and a symbol of French resilience. In 1909, Italy followed. La Gazzetta dello Sport, printed on pink paper, created the Giro d'Italia. Same purpose, same national pride, just as much pain. Then came Spain. In 1935, the Vuelta a España was born. Another newspaper, Informaciones, hoped to unify a politically fractured country. These races weren't just sport, they were nation-building exercises. Cyclists weren't just athletes, they were heroes, performing feats of endurance across landscapes that defined a country's soul. So what made these races last? They had media backing, political purpose, and a captive audience. They became rituals. But here's what most fans don't know. Other countries tried to create Grand Tours. Switzerland had the Tour de Suisse. Germany launched the Deutschland Tour. The United States, it had the Tour de Trump. Yes, that Trump. Later renamed the Tour DuPont. Australia had the Herald Sun Tour. The UK had the Milk Race. Some were ambitious, some had money, some even had big-name riders. But none of them lasted. None of them became true Grand Tours. Why? Because they couldn't match the 3 things that matter most. 3 full weeks of racing, massive media support and money, a respected place on the global calendar. Some failed after a few years. Others never made it past week 1. And the truth is, hosting a Grand Tour is a logistical nightmare. The Tour de France alone requires over 12,000 police officers, helicopters, TV crews, road closures, hotels, doctors, a moving city, every day, for 21 days. Most countries simply didn't want that level of chaos, or couldn't afford it. As cycling grew, the UCI, the sport's governing body, began to formalize the global race calendar. But by the 1980s, the Grand Tours were already legends. There were whispers of a 4th tour, in America, in Asia, even in the Middle East, but nothing stuck. Why? Because the calendar was already full. Cyclists can't realistically race 4 Grand Tours in a season. Sponsors don't want to dilute viewership. Teams can't divide their stars. And the UCI, they leaned into tradition. Adding a 4th Grand Tour would risk disrupting everything. Rankings, media contracts, team budgets. So over time, the Tour, Giro and Vuelta became sacred. The big 3. Unchallenged, untouchable. And then there were the wars. The Tour de France paused during World War I and again in World War II. So did the Giro, but they returned, not as new races, but as institutions. The Vuelta a España survived the Spanish Civil War and the Nazi invasion of Europe. Even during chaos, these races came back, because they meant something more than sport. Meanwhile, other countries struggled. Belgium focused on one-day classics. Germany's tours collapsed under economic pressure. The US never fully embraced multi-week stage racing. Why? Because it wasn't just about roads. It was about identity. The Grand Tours belonged to France, Italy, and Spain. Not just because they built them, but because their cultures embraced them. Every summer, every year. These races are rituals now, like national holidays. Let's break it down. What makes a Grand Tour a Grand Tour? 3 weeks of racing, an entire country as your course, decades of tradition, the world's best riders, a calendar slot that works. Miss just one of these? It doesn't qualify. The Tour of California? It had the terrain. It had fans, but not 3 weeks. Tour de Suisse? A classic, but just 8 stages. It's not about ambition. It's about longevity and gravity. The Grand Tours aren't declared. They're earned over generations. Hey, quick pit stop. If you're still here, you're probably someone who truly loves this sport. Not just the sprint finishes and the jerseys, but the stories, the legends, the why behind the wheels. That's exactly why Ita created BikeFlix. This isn't just a YouTube channel. It's a community for fans like you. So if you're enjoying this ride, hit subscribe, tap that like, and leave us a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, because we're building something together, and it starts with you. All right, back to the road. Could there ever be a 4th Grand Tour? Some say Colombia could do it. The climbs, the altitude, the fans, the passion. Others point to the UAE, with its endless budget and growing influence. Or China, a country with the resources to do anything it sets its mind to. Even Saudi Arabia has invested heavily in sports. A futuristic desert Grand Tour isn't out of the question. But here's the problem. Money can build roads, but it can't build history, or culture, or meaning. And without that, it's just another race. Maybe the real reason there are only 3 Grand Tours is because 3 is perfect. Think about it. Spring, the Giro. Summer, the Tour. Autumn, the Vuelta. Italy, France, Spain. The romantic, the powerful, the redemptive. 3 stories, 3 acts, a complete cycling season. Together, they're not just races, they're a trilogy. And maybe the sport doesn't need a 4th. Maybe it already wrote the perfect story. So let's turn the camera around. If you could create a 4th Grand Tour, what would it look like? Where would it be? What would it be called? And what kind of terrain would it conquer? Drop your ideas in the comments, and we'll feature the best ones in a future BikeFlix episode. If this video made you feel something, hit subscribe. Share it with a fellow cycling fan, because here on BikeFlix.com, we're not just talking bikes. We're riding through the stories that built the sport. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next ride.